The council chamber stretched across 300 meters of polished obsidian, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows that even the most advanced optical sensors couldn't penetrate. Commander Zealith of the Valerian fleet stood at the center of the circular floor, her 4 arms clasped behind her back in the traditional posture of military respect. Around her, holographic projections of the Galactic Council's 17-member species flickered and hummed, each representative seated upon thrones that reflected their homeworld's aesthetic preferences. Zealith had commanded warships through the Krell incursion. She had negotiated ceasefires with the silicon-based architects of Gamma Serpentis. She had even survived 3 assassination attempts by the Shadow Collective during the trade wars of the Inner Rim. But standing here, about to propose what she was about to propose, made her secondary heart pound against her ribcage with an intensity she hadn't felt since her first combat deployment. High Chancellor Morvax, a towering crystalline being whose body refracted light into dancing rainbows across the chamber floor, raised one translucent appendage. The gesture brought immediate silence to the murmuring assembly. His voice resonated through the room, not as sound but as vibrations that every species present could interpret through their own sensory organs. Commander Zealith, you have requested an emergency session of this council. The disruption to our scheduled agenda is not trivial. I trust your justification is proportionate to the inconvenience. Zealith inhaled deeply, drawing courage from the recycled air that tasted faintly of ozone and the cleaning solutions used to maintain the chamber's pristine surfaces. She activated her wrist-mounted data pad, and the space above her head exploded into a 3-dimensional map of the known galaxy. Billions of stars glittered in miniature, connected by the glowing threads of established trade routes and diplomatic channels. But there, in one corner of the projection, sat a void. A perfect sphere of empty space where no routes penetrated, where no trade agreements existed, where the map simply ended. Honored Council, Zealith began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics to reach every corner. For 3,000 standard years, we have maintained what we call the quarantine zone. Sector 773 of the Orion Arm. We tell ourselves it is a restricted military area. We claim it is home to unstable spatial anomalies. We have invented a dozen different explanations for why ships that enter this region never return, why our most advanced probes cease transmission the moment they cross the boundary, why this particular volume of space remains the single largest blank area on our otherwise comprehensive galactic map. Representative Thaxer of the Kryn Empire, a reptilian being covered in bioluminescent scales, leaned forward with obvious impatience. Commander, we are all aware of the quarantine zone. This is not news. The protocols have been in place since before most of our species achieved faster-than-light travel. What is your point? Zealith expanded the projection, zooming into the mysterious sphere until a single yellow star system dominated the holographic display. My point, Representative, is that we have been lying to ourselves. All of us. The quarantine zone is not dangerous because of spatial anomalies. It is dangerous because it contains them. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Them. Not something, or objects, or phenomena. Them. A species. A civilization. An intelligence. Chancellor Morvax's crystalline structure vibrated with what might have been curiosity or concern. Explain yourself, Commander. Clearly and concisely. Zealith gestured, and the hologram shifted to display a series of data streams. 3 months ago, one of our deep space listening posts detected an anomalous signal originating from within the quarantine zone. The signal was brief, lasting only 7.3 seconds, but our analysis teams have been working continuously to decode its contents. She paused, letting the weight of what she was about to say settle into her words. We succeeded. The signal was a distress beacon. Automated. Ancient. And it was broadcasting in 17 different languages, including 3 that we currently use in this very council. The chamber erupted. Representatives rose from their thrones, holographic projections flickering wildly as they gestured and shouted. Zealith stood motionless, waiting for the chaos to subside. It took Chancellor Morvax nearly 5 minutes to restore order. Impossible, declared Representative Quex of the Hive Minds, a collective consciousness that spoke through a cluster of insectoid drones. Our linguistic databases are proprietary. Secure. No signal from within the quarantine zone should possess knowledge of our communication protocols. And yet it does, Zealith replied calmly. Which suggests that whoever built that beacon studied us. Observed us. Long enough to learn our languages, our codes, our very methods of thinking. She manipulated her data pad again, and a new image appeared. A planet. Blue and green and white, rotating slowly beneath swirls of atmospheric clouds. The signal originated from the third planet of a G-type main sequence star. The locals call it Earth. And the beings who inhabit it call themselves humans. The name meant nothing to most of the council members, but Zealith watched as a few of the older representatives, those whose civilizations had been exploring space longer than others, went very still. Admiral Kresh of the Thandorian Dominion, a species that resembled ambulatory crustaceans, clicked his mandibles together in what Zealith recognized as a gesture of extreme discomfort. "Commander," Kresh said slowly, "you are proposing that we investigate the quarantine zone. That we send ships into that region of space. That we make contact with these humans." "I am proposing exactly that, Admiral." "Then you are proposing suicide." The bluntness of the statement cut through the chamber like a plasma blade. Zealith felt her subordinate heart skip several beats, but she kept her expression neutral. "Admiral, with respect, we have no concrete evidence that." "No concrete evidence?" Kresh's voice rose to a volume that made several council members recoil. "Commander, do you know how many expeditions have been sent into that zone? Do you know how many ships, how many crews, how many of the galaxy's finest explorers have vanished trying to map that single system?" He didn't wait for an answer. 47. 47 separate attempts by 12 different species over the span of 3 millennia. Not one vessel returned. Not one distress signal received. Not one fragment of debris recovered. They simply ceased to exist the moment they crossed the boundary. Zealith had anticipated this objection. "Admiral, with respect, those expeditions used outdated technology. Our current defensive systems, our shielding capabilities, our faster-than-light drives are generations beyond what was available during those early attempts. We have quantum communication arrays that can transmit instantaneous data across half the galaxy. We have adaptive armor that can withstand direct hits from neutron star collisions. We have nothing," interrupted a new voice, and the entire council fell silent. The speaker was Elder Sarthes, representative of the Eternals, a species so ancient that they claimed to have witnessed the formation of the galaxy itself. Sarthes rarely spoke during council sessions, preferring to observe and only intervene when matters of critical importance arose. His appearance was humanoid, though his skin had the texture of weathered stone and his eyes glowed with an inner light that suggested vast reserves of power. "Commander Zealith," Sarthes said quietly, his voice carrying despite its soft volume, "I appreciate your courage in bringing this matter before the council. But Admiral Kresh speaks truth, even if his delivery lacks certain diplomatic niceties. The quarantine zone was not established arbitrarily. It was not the result of bureaucratic overcaution or primitive superstition. It exists because our ancestors, beings far wiser and more powerful than we, encountered something in that region of space that terrified them so deeply they chose isolation over investigation." Zealith felt a chill run down her spine, but she pressed forward. "Elder Sarthes, our ancestors also believed that lightning was the anger of gods and that diseases were caused by evil spirits. We have evolved. Our understanding has expanded. Perhaps what frightened them would be comprehensible to us." Sarthes regarded her with those glowing eyes, and for a moment Zealith thought she saw something like pity in his expression. "You misunderstand, Commander. Our ancestors were not frightened by what they didn't understand. They were frightened by what they understood perfectly." He gestured toward the hologram of Earth, still rotating peacefully in the center of the chamber. "They encountered the humans. They spoke with them. They studied them. And then they ran. Not in confusion, Commander. Not in ignorance. They ran in full knowledge of what that species represented. And what do they represent, Elder? Zelith asked, unable to keep a note of challenge from her voice. Sarthes stood, his movement causing his robes to shift and reveal glimpses of the crystalline armor beneath. They represent the end, Commander. The humans are not merely another species to catalog and integrate into our galactic community. They are an anomaly. A statistical impossibility. A species that should not exist according to every model we have of biological and cultural evolution. He began to pace, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Tell me, Commander, what is the first rule of survival for an intelligent species? Zelith frowned, uncertain where this was leading. To adapt to their environment. Precisely. Every species in this chamber evolved on a world suited to their biology. The Kryn developed on a high-gravity planet with dense atmosphere, and so they grew strong and resilient. The hive minds emerged on a world with limited resources, and so they learned cooperation and collective thought. My own people evolved on a planet bathed in intense radiation, and so we developed crystalline structures that convert harmful energy into sustenance. He turned to face Zelith directly. But the humans, Commander, evolved on a death world. The term sent murmurs through the council. Death worlds were rare in the galaxy, planets with such hostile conditions that the emergence of complex life was considered nearly impossible. They were studied from orbit, catalogued, and avoided. Earth, Sarthes continued, has an atmosphere so rich in oxygen that it corrodes metal. It has weather patterns violent enough to level entire cities in hours. It has plate tectonics that reshape continents without warning. It orbits a star that bathes its surface in radiation that would sterilize most worlds. It has gravity strong enough to crush most species under their own weight. And yet the humans did not merely survive these conditions. They thrived in them. They conquered their world not through superior technology or innate powers, but through sheer, relentless persistence. Zelith felt her mouth go dry. Elder, I fail to see how this makes them a threat. We have encountered hardy species before. The Krell can survive in vacuum for short periods. The Thandorians can withstand temperatures that would vaporize water. Resilience is not unique. You are correct, Commander. Resilience alone is not unique. Sarthes moved closer, until he stood directly before her. But the humans possess something beyond resilience. They possess what can only be described as an evolutionary predator complex combined with tool-making intelligence and social cooperation at a scale that defies all conventional models. Do you know what a persistence hunter is, Commander? Zelith shook her head. On Earth, before humans developed advanced technology, they hunted prey not by being faster or stronger, but by simply following it. For days. For weeks if necessary. They would track an animal across vast distances, giving it no opportunity to rest, no chance to recover. The prey would run until its body gave out, until exhaustion killed it more surely than any weapon. And then the humans would claim what remained. He let that image settle. Now imagine that mentality, that willingness to pursue a goal with infinite patience and absolute determination, combined with intelligence equal to our own and technology advancing at a rate that makes our greatest scientific achievement seem like children's finger paintings. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Even the ambient hum of the environmental system seemed muted. The last expedition to Earth, Sarthes said, his voice barely above a whisper, was sent by my people, 700 years ago. It was a diplomatic mission, staffed by our most skilled negotiators and scientists. They made contact with the humans. Initial exchanges were positive. The humans seemed curious, friendly, eager to learn about the wider galaxy. And then our expedition made a mistake. He paused. They offered to share advanced technology. Medical equipment that could cure diseases. Energy systems that would eliminate resource scarcity. Transportation that would revolutionize their civilization. Standard first contact protocols, designed to ease primitive species into galactic society. What happened? Zelith asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. The humans refused. Not out of pride or ignorance. They refused because they understood, perhaps better than we did, what accepting such gifts would mean. It would make them dependent. It would stunt their own technological development. It would make them clients rather than equals. Sarthi's eyes seemed to glow brighter. And then they asked our expedition to leave. Politely. Formally. But with absolute finality. They said they would make their own way. Develop their own technology. Earn their place among the stars through their own efforts rather than charity. He turned back to the council. Our expedition refused. We insisted that the benefits outweighed their concerns. We attempted to establish a permanent presence in their system. And that, Commander, is when we learned what it means to make an enemy of humanity. Zelith found herself leaning forward despite her training. What did they do? Nothing, at first. For 3 months, they simply observed our ships. Studied our movements. Analyzed our communications. And then, in a single coordinated strike executed with precision that our military strategists still cannot fully explain, they neutralized every vessel in the expedition. Sarthi's expression was grim. Not destroyed, Commander. Neutralized. Every ship disabled, every weapon system rendered inoperative, every faster-than-light drive shut down. All without a single casualty. The humans had reverse-engineered enough of our technology in 3 months to exploit weaknesses we didn't know existed. And then they sent a message. What message? 3 words, in our own language, transmitted across all frequencies: leave. Never. Return. Sarthi's moved back toward his throne. And we did, Commander. We ran. Because we understood that we had not encountered a primitive species in need of guidance. We had encountered something far more dangerous. We had encountered a species that learns from every interaction, that adapts to every challenge, that treats every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved rather than a barrier to be accepted. And if we had stayed, if we had escalated to actual combat, we knew with absolute certainty that eventually, inevitably, the humans would have won. The weight of his words pressed down on the council like a physical force. Zelith struggled to process what she was hearing. It contradicted everything she knew about galactic history, about the careful progression of civilizations from primitive to advanced, about the natural hierarchy that emerged when species of different technological levels encountered each other. Chancellor Morvax's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. Elder Sarthes, what you describe is unprecedented. If the humans possess such capabilities, why have they remained isolated? Why haven't they expanded beyond their system? Surely any species with the intelligence and drive you describe would seek to explore, to colonize, to establish their place in the galaxy. That, Chancellor, is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of all, Sarthes replied. The humans have not remained isolated by our decree. They have chosen isolation. They know we are here. They have known for centuries. They observe our ships at the edge of the quarantine zone. They monitor our communications. They study us just as thoroughly as we once tried to study them. But they choose to stay on their world, in their system, developing at their own pace, waiting for the moment when they can emerge not as supplicants or junior partners, but as equals or perhaps even superiors. Representative Thaxter spoke up, his scales flickering with agitation. Then what does this distress beacon mean? If they are content to remain isolated, why send a signal now? Zelith had been considering the same question. She manipulated her data pad, bringing up the decoded contents of the signal. The beacon is not from the current human civilization. According to our analysis, it's at least 800 years old, possibly older. It was sent by what appears to be an automated probe, likely from one of humanity's early attempts at interstellar exploration. The message is simple: it provides coordinates to Earth, basic information about human biology and culture, and an invitation for peaceful contact. An invitation, Admiral Kresh said slowly, that predates their encounter with our expedition. Exactly. The beacon was sent before humans knew we existed, before they understood what accepting help from advanced species might cost them. It's an artifact of a more naive time in their history. So they might not even want us to respond to it, Chancellor Morvax observed. We don't know, Zelith admitted. But the beacon exists. It's still transmitting. And eventually, some other species, perhaps one without the benefit of our historical knowledge, might detect it and decide to investigate. If we don't act, if we don't at least attempt to establish some form of dialogue, we might find ourselves in a situation where first contact happens without our input or control. Elder Sarthes had returned to his throne, settling into it with the careful movements of extreme age. So you propose that we respond to this beacon? That we send an expedition to Earth? That we deliberately violate the quarantine zone and risk waking what we have worked for centuries to let sleep? I propose that we cannot hide forever, Zelith said firmly. I propose that the humans will eventually come to us, whether we wish it or not, and when that day arrives, it would be better if we had at least tried to establish peaceful relations rather than treating them as a threat to be contained. I propose that fear, however well-founded, is not a sustainable diplomatic policy. The council chamber erupted into debate once more. Representatives argued, advocated, condemned, and supported. Zelith stood at the center of it all, waiting for the decision that would either validate her courage or confirm her folly. She thought about the rotating blue planet in the hologram, about the beings who lived there, who had chosen isolation over dependency, who had turned away an offer of help because they understood that true strength came from self-reliance rather than charity. What kind of species did that? What kind of beings valued their independence so highly that they would reject centuries of technological advancement in favor of earning their own progress through blood and toil and time? And more importantly, what would happen when those beings finally decided they were ready to step out of their isolation and claim their place among the stars? The debate raged on, but Zelith already knew, deep in her multiple hearts, that the decision had been made the moment she activated that hologram. The beacon had been detected. The knowledge of Earth's location was out there, circulating through databases and intelligence networks. Eventually, someone would go. The only question was whether it would be an official expedition with proper protocols and diplomatic safeguards, or a rogue operation driven by curiosity or greed or ambition. She looked up at the hologram of Earth one more time, at that small blue world spinning in the darkness, and wondered what the humans were doing at this very moment. Were they watching this council session through whatever surveillance methods they had developed? Were they laughing at the fear their mere existence inspired? Or were they simply going about their lives, unaware that the galaxy they had chosen to ignore was now debating whether to ignore them in return? The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Zelith had expected. 9-8 in favor of sending an expedition. Chancellor Morvax announced the decision with obvious reluctance, his crystalline form flickering uncertainly in the chamber's dim light. Commander Zelith, he said, his voice carrying a weight that made every word feel like a burden, you will lead this expedition. You will take a single ship, staffed with volunteers only. You will approach Earth with all peaceful intentions clearly displayed. And if the humans give any indication, any sign whatsoever, that your presence is unwelcome. He paused, and the silence stretched for 3 full heartbeats. You will retreat immediately and recommend that the quarantine zone be expanded and reinforced with every resource at our disposal. Is that understood? Yes, Chancellor. Then this session is adjourned. May the ancients watch over you, Commander. Because once you cross that boundary, you will be beyond any help we can provide. The council members began to fade, their holographic projections winking out one by one until Zelith stood alone in the vast obsidian chamber. She looked down at her data pad, at the coordinates that would guide her ship to Earth, to first contact with a species that had terrified the galaxy's most ancient and powerful civilizations. In 3 days, she would depart. In 3 weeks, if faster-than-light drives performed as expected, she would arrive at the edge of the quarantine zone. And then, for the first time in 700 years, someone would deliberately cross that boundary and see what waited on the other side. Commander Zealith closed her eyes and offered a prayer to whatever forces governed the universe. Not for courage. Not for wisdom. But for the hope that humanity had changed in the centuries since they had expelled the Eternals from their system. That perhaps time had mellowed them, made them more willing to accept neighbors and allies. But deep in her hearts, in the place where instinct lived beyond the reach of logic or hope, she suspected that when she finally met the humans, she would understand exactly why Elder Sarthes and his people had run all those centuries ago. And she suspected that understanding would come too late. The Valerian cruiser Infinite Horizon hung at the edge of the quarantine zone like a silver needle suspended in black velvet. Commander Zealith stood on the bridge, her 4 arms moving across control surfaces with practiced efficiency, even as her mind churned with doubts that had grown stronger with each passing light year of their journey. Behind her, a crew of 47 volunteers from 11 different species maintained their stations with the focused calm of professionals who knew they might not return home. The viewscreen displayed what sensors insisted was empty space, but Zealith could see the slight shimmer that marked the boundary, a distortion in spacetime so subtle that only the most sensitive equipment could detect it. The quarantine zone didn't exist as a physical barrier. There were no force fields, no weapons platforms, no signs warning travelers to turn back. There was simply a line that ships crossed and never returned from. "All stations report ready, Commander," announced Lieutenant Vex, the ship's tactical officer. The young Kryn warrior's scales flickered with nervous energy, shifting from deep blue to pale green and back again. "Defensive systems are at maximum. Quantum communication array is linked to the relay buoys we deployed. If anything happens to us, the Council will know within seconds." "Small comfort if we're vaporized," muttered Ensign Threll from the navigation console. The hive mind's drone cluster vibrated with anxiety, their collective consciousness struggling to maintain cohesion under stress. "Maintain discipline," Zealith said firmly, though she couldn't fault her crew's apprehension. She felt it herself, a cold weight in her chest that no amount of training could fully suppress. She moved to the center of the bridge, where a holographic display showed their planned route. "We proceed exactly as briefed. Slow approach, all weapon systems locked down, broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. We do not, under any circumstances, take hostile action first. Is that clear?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the bridge. Zealith took a deep breath and gave the order she had been rehearsing in her mind for 3 weeks. "Helm, take us in. Point 1 light speed. Steady as she goes." The Infinite Horizon began to move, its engines humming with barely contained power as it approached the boundary. Zealith watched the viewscreen, her secondary hearts pounding so hard she could feel them in her throat. The shimmer grew closer, filling her vision, and then, they crossed. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. The bridge crew collectively held their breath, waiting for destruction that didn't come. Sensors remained operational. Life support functioned normally. The ship responded to helm commands without issue. Zealith felt a surge of hope so intense it made her dizzy. "Status report," she commanded, forcing her voice to remain steady. "All systems nominal," Vex reported, surprise evident in his tone. "No hostile contacts. No weapons lock. No spatial anomalies detected." He paused, mandibles clicking together in confusion. "Commander, it's just empty space." "Maintain alert status," Zealith ordered, unwilling to let relief cloud her judgment. "Ensign Threll, what's our position relative to Earth?" The hive mind's drones consulted their instruments, conferring with themselves in rapid, high-pitched chirps. "Approximately 37 light-years from the target system, Commander. At current speed, we should arrive in 48 hours. Reduce speed to 0.05 light. I want our sensors at maximum sensitivity. If there's anything out here, anything at all, I want to know about it before it knows about us." The hours stretched into a full day, then 2. The Infinite Horizon pushed deeper into the quarantine zone, and with each passing hour, the mystery only deepened. Space here was no different from space anywhere else in the galaxy. Stars burned with predictable regularity. Nebulae drifted in their ancient patterns. There were no hidden weapons, no lurking warships, no signs of the threat that had kept the galaxy at bay for 3,000 years. "This makes no sense," Lieutenant Vex said during the second day, his scales now settled into a dull gray that reflected his confusion. 47 expeditions vanished in this region. 47. But we haven't seen any debris, any residual energy signatures, any indication that ships were destroyed here. "Maybe they weren't destroyed," suggested Dr. Kareth, the ship's chief scientist. The elderly Eternal had volunteered for the mission despite Elder Sarthisa's warnings, driven by curiosity that even millennia of life hadn't diminished. Maybe they were taken intact. Captured for study. By whom? Vex challenged. "We've been scanning continuously for 2 days. There's nothing out here. No ships, no stations, no artificial structures of any kind. Nothing that our sensors can detect," Kareth corrected gently. "There is a difference." Zealeth considered this possibility. The humans had demonstrated, centuries ago, an ability to penetrate eternal technology and exploit weaknesses the ancients hadn't known existed. Could they be observing the infinite horizon right now, using methods the ship's sensors couldn't perceive? The thought made her skin prickle beneath her uniform. "Continue sweeps," she ordered. "Rotate through all frequency ranges. If something is watching us, maybe we'll catch an echo of it." On the third day, they detected their first sign of human presence. It wasn't a ship or a weapon. It was a satellite, ancient and barely functional, tumbling through space in a slow rotation that suggested its stabilizers had failed decades ago. Sensors identified it as the source of the distress beacon that had started this entire mission. "Bring us alongside," Zealeth commanded. "Carefully. Dr. Kareth, prepare a boarding team. I want that satellite brought aboard for examination." The recovery operation took 4 hours. The satellite was small, barely 3 meters in length, and its surface was pitted with micrometeorite impacts that spoke to decades or perhaps centuries of exposure to unshielded space. When they finally got it into the cargo bay and established a safe perimeter, Zealeth joined the examination team. "Primitive by our standards," Kareth observed, running scanning equipment over the satellite's surface. "Chemical rocket propulsion. Solar panels for power generation. Very basic sensor suite. But the construction is remarkably robust. Whoever built this understood the importance of redundancy and durability." "Can you access its data banks?" Zealeth asked. "Already in progress." Kareth manipulated controls on a portable terminal, and holographic displays flickered to life above the satellite. "Interesting. The computer system uses binary code, far less efficient than quantum processing, but incredibly stable. And look here." He highlighted a section of the display. The creators included a message, something called a golden record. Audio recordings, images, mathematical concepts. An introduction to human civilization for anyone who might find this device. "Play it," Zealeth said. Kareth made the adjustment, and suddenly the cargo bay filled with sound. Not the translated vibrations that allowed different species to communicate, but actual acoustic waves that the ship's computer struggled to interpret and render into something comprehensible. What emerged was haunting. A voice, presumably human, speaking words that the translation matrix converted into standard galactic language. "We hope someday, having solved the problems we face, to join a community of galactic civilizations. This record represents our hope and our determination and our goodwill in a vast and awesome universe." The words hung in the air long after the recording ended. Zealeth felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Hope and determination and goodwill. Was this the same species that had disabled an entire eternal expedition? That had terrified the galaxy's most powerful civilizations? "There's more," Kareth said quietly. "Music." They included music. He activated another file, and a new sound filled the cargo bay. It was unlike anything Zealith had ever heard, complex and layered, with rhythms that seemed to pull at something primal in her nervous system. This particular piece is identified as Bach, Brandenburg Concerto No. 2. Apparently it's several hundred years old by human reckoning. Created before they achieved space flight. They sent their art into the void, Lieutenant Vex observed, his scales shifting to a contemplative purple. Not just technical specifications or scientific data. They sent the things that mattered to them. Their music, their voices, their dreams. They sent an invitation, Zealith corrected. Just as Elder Sarthes said. Before they knew what we were, before they understood the cost of accepting help from advanced species, they reached out with openness and trust. She looked at the battered satellite, at this artifact of human optimism, and felt the weight of her mission pressing down with renewed force. Which makes what we're about to do either very wise or catastrophically foolish. Commander, interrupted Ensign Threll from the bridge via comm system, you need to return immediately. We're detecting something. Zealith's hearts lurched. Hostile contact. No, Commander. Not hostile. We've achieved visual range of Earth's system. And you need to see this. Zealith sprinted back to the bridge, Kareth and Vex close behind her. The view screen had been adjusted to maximum magnification, displaying the star system that had haunted galactic nightmares for 3,000 years. The yellow sun burned at the center, surrounded by its family of planets. But it wasn't the celestial bodies that made Zealith stop dead in her tracks. It was what surrounded them. By the ancients, Kareth whispered, the system was a hive of activity. Thousands of structures orbited the various planets and moons, everything from small satellites to massive stations that could house millions. Ships moved between them in carefully coordinated patterns, their engine signatures indicating propulsion systems far more advanced than what the satellite had possessed. Energy collectors hung in solar orbits, drinking the star's radiation and converting it into power. Automated manufacturing facilities processed raw materials harvested from asteroid belts. Communication networks pulsed with data traffic that would have overwhelmed the Infinite Horizons computers in seconds. This is impossible, Vex said, his voice barely above a whisper. This level of development, this degree of infrastructure. Commander, by our estimates, a species would need at least 10,000 years to achieve this from a pre-spaceflight baseline. Elder Sarthes said the humans expelled the Eternals only 700 years ago. Perhaps he was wrong about the timeline, Kareth suggested, but even he sounded doubtful. Or perhaps, Zealith said slowly, the humans developed faster than anyone thought possible. She moved closer to the view screen, studying the organized chaos of humanity's claimed territory. Ensign Threll, can you isolate individual ship designs? I want to know if we're looking at a unified civilization or multiple competing factions. The hive mind's drones worked in concert, processing the vast amount of data streaming from the system. Difficult to determine, Commander. We're detecting hundreds of different ship configurations, but there's no obvious pattern of territorial division. No borders within the system. No evidence of military standoffs or resource conflicts. If these are competing factions, they're remarkably cooperative. Or they're all part of a single unified authority, Vex said grimly. Which would make sense if you're planning to defend your system against external threats. Unity is strength. Commander, called out Junior Technician Mira from the communications station. The young Valorian's voice cracked with stress. We're being hailed. Multiple frequencies, multiple languages, including our own. The signal is repeating on a loop. Put it through, Zealith ordered, bracing herself. The voice that emerged from the bridge speakers was calm, almost pleasant. The translation matrix rendered it as feminine, though Zealith had no idea if human gender worked the same way it did for Valorians. Unidentified vessel, this is Earth System Traffic Control. You have entered protected space without authorization or prior communication. Please state your identity, origin, and purpose. Be advised that we have detected weapons systems aboard your vessel. We request that you power down all offensive capabilities as a gesture of peaceful intent. Failure to comply will result in defensive action. You have 60 seconds to respond. 60 seconds. Zealith felt her training take over, suppressing panic with cold calculation. Technician Mira, open all communication channels. Broadcast on every frequency we have. She moved to the center of the bridge, straightening her uniform and lifting her head in what she hoped would be interpreted as a confident, non-threatening posture. This is Commander Zealith of the Valerian Fleet, representing the Galactic Council. We are responding to a distress beacon transmitted from this system approximately 800 years ago. Our intentions are entirely peaceful. We are willing to power down our weapons systems as requested. Commander, Vex hissed, powering down weapons in unknown territory violates every, do it, Zealith snapped. Now. The tactical officer hesitated for only a moment before executing the order. Weapons offline, Commander. We're defenseless. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. Zealith watched the chronometer, expecting at any moment to see weapons fire on the viewscreen, to feel the ship shudder under impact, to spend her final moments regretting her decision to lead this mission. Instead, the voice returned. Commander Zealith, your compliance is noted and appreciated. Welcome to the Sol System. We are aware of the Galactic Council and your various member species. Please adjust your heading to the following coordinates and proceed at a speed no greater than 0.01 light. An escort will rendezvous with you in approximately 40 minutes. Do not deviate from the assigned course or attempt to scan planetary bodies or artificial structures. Any such action will be interpreted as hostile reconnaissance. Confirmation of understanding required. Zealith swallowed hard. They knew about the Council. They knew about the member species. How long had they been watching? Understood, Earth System Traffic Control. We will comply with all instructions. May I ask about the distress beacon? Is it still considered an active invitation for contact? A pause, longer than before. When the voice returned, it carried a hint of what might have been amusement. Commander, that beacon was launched by the Voyager program in the 20th century by your chronological reckoning. The individuals who created it have been dead for centuries. Humanity's perspective on first contact has evolved significantly since then. However, we appreciate your adherence to diplomatic protocols, even if they're based on outdated information. We will explain more when you arrive. Earth System Traffic Control out. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Zealith released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Helm, adjust heading as instructed. Reduce speed to 0.01 light. All hands, maintain alert status but no aggressive actions under any circumstances. We're committed now. The Infinite Horizon changed course, angling deeper into the system. As they traveled, Zealith studied the infrastructure they passed. Up close, the scope of human achievement was even more staggering. The stations weren't just functional, they were elegant, designed with an aesthetic sense that suggested these beings cared about beauty as much as efficiency. The ships they glimpsed ranged from small single-pilot craft to vessels that dwarfed the infinite horizon, and every single one moved with purpose and coordination that spoke to advanced computer systems or perhaps enhanced biological intelligence. Commander, Kareth said quietly, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from those solar collectors. The efficiency rate is extraordinary. By my calculations, humanity has harnessed approximately 40% of their star's total output. That's approaching Kardashev Type 2 civilization levels. In 700 years, Vex added. They went from being expelled by the Eternals to near-peer status with the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy in less time than it takes most species to colonize their own moon. Movement on the viewscreen, Ensign Threll announced. 3 vessels approaching on intercept course. The escort arrived exactly on schedule, and Zealith got her first clear look at human spacecraft design. The 3 ships were sleek and predatory, their hulls dark enough to be difficult to track visually. Sensors suggested advanced armor plating, energy shielding that operated on principles the Infinite Horizons computer couldn't fully analyze, and weapons systems that remained powered down but radiated a latent threat that made Zealot's skin crawl. These were not exploration vessels. These were warships, designed by beings who understood violence intimately. Earth System Traffic Control to Infinite Horizon. Maintain current speed and heading. Our escort will guide you to the designated meeting location. Please note that you are being continuously monitored. Any attempt to deviate, scan restricted areas, or power up weapons systems will result in immediate interdiction. Are we clear? Perfectly clear, Zealoth replied. The journey to the meeting location took another 6 hours. They passed the orbit of a massive gas giant that sensors identified as Jupiter, its colorful bands swirling in complex patterns that suggested a storm system of unimaginable violence. Stations orbited several of its moons, harvesting resources and conducting research that Zealoth could only speculate about. They skirted the edge of an asteroid belt where automated mining operations extracted raw materials with ruthless efficiency. And finally, they approached the third planet, the blue and green world that had haunted the galaxy's collective nightmares, Earth. From this distance, it looked peaceful. Beautiful, even. Clouds swirled across oceans that reflected the yellow sun's light in dancing patterns. Continents sprawled beneath, their surfaces marked with the geometric regularity that indicated massive urban development. Orbital platforms ringed the planet like a crown of steel and glass, each one large enough to house a small city's worth of population. This is where they want us to stop, the helm officer announced. Coordinates achieved. All stop, Zealoth ordered. Maintain position. Now we wait. They didn't have to wait long. A new ship appeared, larger than the escorts but smaller than the Infinite Horizon, its design suggesting a diplomatic vessel rather than a warship. It approached to within 100 meters and held position, matching their orbit precisely. Incoming transmission, Technician Mira announced. Visual and audio. They want to establish face-to-face communication. Accepted, Zealoth said, smoothing her uniform one final time. Let's meet our hosts. The view screen flickered, and for the first time in 700 years, a member of the Galactic Council came face-to-face with a human being. She was smaller than Zealoth had expected, standing perhaps 1.7 meters tall by galactic standard measurements. Her skin was a shade of brown that reminded Zealoth of certain types of wood, smooth and unblemished. Hair, black and pulled back in a practical style, framed a face with features that seemed simultaneously familiar and alien. Two eyes, dark and intensely focused, studied Zealoth with the same careful attention that Zealoth was applying to her. The human wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal decoration, though Zealoth noticed several small badges that likely indicated rank or specialization. When the human spoke, the translation matrix rendered her words with crisp clarity, though Zealoth found herself wishing she could hear the original language, to understand the rhythms and tones that might reveal more than mere vocabulary. Commander Zealoth. I am Ambassador Chenli, representing Earth's diplomatic corps. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to our system and thank you for your adherence to our security protocols. A slight pause. I must admit, we did not expect the Galactic Council to respond to that old Voyager beacon. We'd assumed it had been lost to the void centuries ago. Zealoth inclined her head in what she hoped was a respectful gesture. Ambassador Chen, thank you for allowing us to approach your world. I apologize for any distress our arrival may have caused. The beacon was only recently detected, and the Council felt it was important to respond, albeit belatedly. The Council. Chen's expression shifted subtly, showing what might have been amusement or skepticism. Tell me, Commander, does the Council still maintain that ridiculous quarantine zone around our system? Do you still tell yourselves stories about the terrifying humans who devour civilizations and commit atrocities beyond imagination? The directness of the question caught Zealoth off guard. Ambassador, the quarantine zone is maintained for mutual security. The historical record suggests that previous contact attempts ended poorly. The historical record, Chen repeated, her tone hardening slightly. Let me tell you what actually happened, Commander. 700 years ago, the Eternals arrived in our system. We were just beginning to establish permanent presence beyond Earth's orbit. We had a handful of settlements on Luna and Mars. We were excited, terrified, and hopeful all at once. First contact. The moment every human child dreamed about. She paused, and Zelith could see anger flashing in those dark eyes. And the Eternals treated us like children. Worse than children. They offered us their technology like we were beggars who should be grateful for scraps from their table. They didn't offer partnership. They didn't offer to share knowledge and grow together. They offered dependency dressed up as charity.